Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another CPC Strategy hosted webinar. If this is your first time with us, welcome, and we hope to see more of you at future events. If this is not your first time, welcome back, and happy to have you here again for another webinar. So, attribution modeling. Do you struggle to find a model that fairly attributes every channel's influence on our conversion? We at CPC Strategy definitely recognize that accurate attribution is not so simple, which brings us to today's topic. Better measure your prospecting campaigns with custom attribution modeling. In this webinar, our speakers will walk you through Google Analytics attribution models, as well as how to build a customized attribution model for your brand with custom channel groupings. So, before we start today, I'd like to briefly introduce CPC Strategy for those of you that are unfamiliar. We are a retail-focused paid search management company, and we focus specifically in the realms of retail-focused PPC, Google Shopping, Amazon sales acceleration, as well as creative and content optimization, as well as Facebook performance marketing. So we have over 500 active retail clients, and these range from CPG to apparel and even some services. And we work, from prospecting strategies as well as more bottom of the funnel strategies. So that's a little bit about us, CPC. Now I would like to introduce myself. My name is Annalicia. I am CPC Strategy's webinar coordinator, and I'll be moderating today's webinar and handling your questions on the back end. So first question, number one question we always get, session recording and slides, will they be sent out? Yes, they will be sent out within 48 hours to all registrants, so rest assured you'll have a copy of the deck as well as the recording. Secondly, we'd like to point out the questions tab in the Go-To webinar panel. This is where you can submit your questions for your speakers. To me, I'll be kind of queuing them up on the back end towards the end to our Q&A portion for our speakers. So feel free to shoot over any questions you may have. Also, if you're facing any technical issues, please feel free to send me a chat through there as well, and I'll troubleshoot through the back end. Also, we do have some additional resources available for download in the handout tab under the questions tab on the panel. And these are some additional resources available for download, and they're relevant to today's topic. I believe we have 2 guidebooks and 2 blog posts there today, so feel free to download those. Also, quick note that we do have some upcoming webinars if you're interested in retargeting on Amazon, Q4 prep. We also do have our summits coming up for e-commerce and Amazon, so if you are interested in registering for those, please feel free to send me a chat. So lastly, we ask you to join in on a couple of poll questions. I will launch one right now, and this is just the first one, just to gauge the experience level of our audience, so our speakers really have an idea of your experience and can talk towards that along the way. So do you currently use custom channel groupings for attribution modeling? So yes and no, Google Analytics default groupings is all you use right now. So again, we're asking, just to gauge your experience with the topic at hand. And, if the answer is yes, hopefully we can provide some useful tips around channel groupings that you might not be too familiar with. And if not, great, super exciting. We're looking forward to introducing this effective custom model to you all. So I'll close the poll now, and I'll reveal the questions to you all. Manage polls. So 18% of you said yes, that you do use custom channel groupings. Great. And then 82 is no, that you use the Google Analytics default groupings only. So hopefully we can provide insights for all of you in our coming content. So now I would like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Louis Brannon, our Senior Retail Search Manager, and we have Nick Meneses, who's a Lead Retail Search Manager, both on the search team. So Nick, if you'd like to introduce yourselves to our audience.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Thank you guys for tuning in. Always great to be speaking with you all. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen, and hopefully we can provide some great value today. I'm really glad to be joined by my good friend and colleague, Nick Meneses, who is also a Senior Retail Search Manager here at CPC. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening in.
Awesome. So we're going to talk to you guys today about what attribution modeling is and why it's important. We're not going to spend much time on that because all of you guys are pretty familiar with the basic definition of attribution modeling, but we want to break down what Google Analytics does and how it treats attribution. And what we're going to spend most of our time talking about is the difference between Google Analytics default channel groupings and the custom channel groupings that you can make, and also the default attribution models that you can look at in Google Analytics. We're going to look at a few additional reports within Google Analytics that you can use to complement your kind of attribution approach. And then we're going to lastly talk about the custom channel grouping setup, which we think is pretty key in this whole kind of discussion of analyzing your campaign performance through a more strategic attribution mindset. All right, so what is attribution and why is it important? So first of all, attribution is simply the set of rules that determines how you give credit for a sale or a conversion and how you assign the value of that conversion to different touch points along the conversion path. So obviously we know that conversion paths are getting longer and longer. What is it, Nick, now that it's the most recent number that the average customer journey contains? How many touch points? It's like 17 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's up to 17. It was previously like 14 or something like that. So
right, so last year it was 14, and then the most recent data we read, I think it was from eMarketer, was 17 is the number. So 17 kind of interactions with with ads and different campaigns before a customer actually makes a purchase. So what an attribution model does is it simply goes beyond looking at the default mode, which is last click, meaning the last interaction with an ad before someone came to your website and made a purchase. Rather than assigning all the value to that last click, attribution models assign value to different points or all the points along that journey, or some of them depending on what kind of model you have set up. And we're going to go into that. And of course, you can see how that's valuable, right? Because with so many different touch points along the journey, we need to know how all of our different tactics, all of our different advertising tactics played into that. So let's move on. Why is it important? Because like we just said, you need to understand the path. You know, we're never going to be there, you know, with the person and understanding exactly what they're thinking while they're going through a purchase path. So there's always going to be information that we don't know. But the next best thing is looking at every kind of touch point along the way, and then using a system to try and understand what role those touch points played in ultimately making a conversion. And it's also important because it lets you more clearly evaluate your marketing tactics and determine which ones are working, which ones aren't. And not only which ones are working, which ones aren't, but which ones are working better than others and which ones are playing key roles. And then lastly, it allows you to potentially create new sources of revenue and go up market or be more effective in certain parts of the funnel. It allows you to get that insight. Okay, so what are some different examples of platforms that give you the ability to look at attribution? First of all, on the left side here, we're looking at enterprise level platforms. So again, this type of attribution reporting lives inside of your web analytics platform. Most of you guys are probably using Google Analytics, which is listed on the right side under non-enterprise level platforms. On the left, we did want to mention some of the enterprise level platforms. We do have some clients that are using these, but things like Adobe Analytics, which used to be known as Omniture, and IBM Analytics, which used to be known as T-Leaf, and of course GA 360, which is the enterprise level paid version of Google Analytics. These are really robust platforms that can give you a lot of great information in terms of setting up attribution models and allowing you to do this types of analysis that we talked about. But on the right side, there are a few non-enterprise level, more kind of entry level platforms that also work. There's a couple listed there at the bottom. How do you pronounce that, Nick? The second one?
the Pewig.
Pewig, okay. And then QuantCast. But by far, the number one most common and, in our opinion, most effective, most easy kind of easy setup, easy to get going, easy to analyze is Google Analytics. And most of you guys use Google Analytics already. So hopefully, you know, this is going to be very valuable for you, because that's what we're going to focus on today is Google Analytics. So let's walk through the different default or out of the box attribution models that you can look at in Google Analytics. Okay, first of all, last click. This is what all of your reports are set up in as, by default. And this applies to Google AdWords as well, and Bing ads and any other type of marketing platform typically that you're running ads through. Everything by default is set to last click, meaning that if there are multiple ads that get clicked on, multiple keywords that a user searches, and multiple interactions that a user makes, when they make a conversion, the ad platform looks at the last touch point that brought that traffic into the website that led to a conversion, and they give all the conversion credit to that last touch point. So let's take a quick scenario where a user searches for doggy beds, and they click on a text ad for nicksdoggybeds.com. They go to the website, they don't make a purchase, but they check it out. Later, they interact with a Google Shopping ad because they're doing another search for something around doggy beds. They click on a Google Shopping ad, and then they go back to Nick's website, and then ultimately, a few days later, they remember the name of the website, so they search it, but they don't spell it properly. They click on one of our branded text ads, they go to the website, and they make a purchase. That credit is all going to go to the brand text ad campaign because it was the last interaction in the customer journey. And so last click would give credit, all the credit, to that last click, last interaction. And this is the most commonly used model. Like I said, it's by default in these ad platforms, and in Google Analytics, it's what it usually defaults to when you're looking at campaign performance or you're looking at channel performance. The last click model is enabled by default. And what we mean by this third bullet point here, that it favors low funnel traffic sources, what that means is that when you're looking at your campaign mix or you're looking at your channel mix, you typically see most of your conversion value coming through low funnel sources like brand text or like product specific campaigns or Google Shopping campaigns, because this is what people typically interact with right before they make a purchase. So when you're looking at this model, it tends to favor those types of campaigns and those types of traffic sources. All right, on the flip side of that, there's one called first click. First click is exactly the same as last click, but it just gives all the credit to the first click. So naturally, these favor high funnel traffic sources, and by high funnel, we mean more prospecting type campaigns or non-brand generic type. When you're getting in front of audiences that are not familiar with you and you're trying to grow your brand awareness and you have those types of campaigns in action, if you're looking at first click, that tends to favor those campaigns because, as we know, most of the search volume that's out there is generic, and people are just searching for product, types of products, types of things that they want. They're not necessarily searching for your brand name. So when you're running a lot of those types of campaigns, it might be beneficial to look at first click because it gives credit to that first touch point. But again, it gives all the credit to that first touch point. So it's a very growth oriented model because it allows you to assign full credit to the person, to the tactic that got the traffic in the door. And so it's good from that standpoint. If that's all you want to look at is like what tactics that I'm using or what campaigns that I'm using are doing a great job of getting people in the door, this is where you would look at first click. Nick, do you have any examples of clients you've worked with or brands you've managed where first click was a good option, or have you not really relied on this too much?
Yeah, I would say most people default to last click because just again, it's the default setup in the account. What I would say is, and again, what we aren't necessarily going to say, hey, you should stick to a certain model. It's really going to be, utilizing all the different models and comparing the two together. So I guess the example for mine would be is I had a high AOV client, and it was like a workout systems where, hey, it's like a home gym, and basically, they hadn't seen much growth year over year. They were worried about the fact that their brand recognition seemed to be actually down. Branded traffic was down year over year. And so the question is, hey, how do we improve brand recognition? And a lot of that's going to be, we need to get more awareness. And so the question is then, hey, how do we get awareness? And the answer to that is obviously higher funnel approaches, getting people aware who aren't necessarily searching for your brand. So that would be non-branded text, that would be prospecting on social ads, things like that. The problem is that they wanted to avoid a lot of those high funnel searches, because in the past, by looking at a last click model, they had said, hey, it simply wasn't profitable.
The ROAS was terrible.
Yeah, ROAS is terrible. It's, we're still just seeing that direct and branded text ads are doing the best from a ROAS perspective. We're just driving a bunch of traffic. It's not doing anything. But if you actually took that and you say, hey, let's look at first click model for a second and see, where did that branded traffic originate from? Where did people first interact with your business? Switching to that first click model provided us that information. Oh, people actually were really engaging with your social ads. And those eventually led to a sale, and those lifted your branded text ads. So by being able to look at that first click data, we were able to say, hey, this is a good idea. We should be expanding our reach. And we were able to basically add additional non-branded text ads, add social media ads, and we saw the branded traffic pick back up. And actually we saw what we'd call brand lift, where we saw branded traffic increase and overall revenue increase. And it was because of the addition of those higher funnel campaigns.
Right, and if I remember correctly, that particular client actually ended up switching their budget allocation pretty significantly after they started looking at the first click performance. They started doing more of that upper funnel kind of awareness campaigns. So again, that's a good example. And like Nick mentioned, we're not here to endorse a specific model. What we want to do is show you how to interpret these different models and understand them so that you can apply them to kind of specific business scenarios where you need to get more insight. So let's look at the next one, which is called linear. Linear splits the conversion credit evenly among all the touch points. So this one's really interesting, and a lot of people like this one. A lot of our clients tend to be interested in this one and look at it frequently because, again, as we know, there's so many touch points on the journey. Who's to say that the first one is the most important or the last one is the most important? Or it gets tricky when you try to weight them depending on where they are in the process. So linear just makes it simple and says, hey, every single touch point gets a piece of that conversion. So this, I think, works well when you have a lot of different campaigns in the mix and a lot of different tactics. You're spending 10K a month on upper funnel, you're spending 10K a month on shopping, you're spending 10K a month on social, you got 40K to protect your brand terms, you got 20K in dynamic search campaigns, where you have all these different kind of campaigns running, and you have a longer conversion cycle. Maybe you sell a product that typically takes 15 or 20 days to a month before someone ultimately makes a purchase. Looking at the linear attribution model can actually help you start to understand a simple breakdown of conversion split credit among all those touch points. And so, yeah.
To chime in there, I think that's a great point that you said about the long purchasing cycle. Attribution is important regardless, but especially for high AOV clients, especially for people who are selling products that, take some time to actually think about, hey, do I really need this product? People aren't going to buy a $5,000 couch in one day. And so there's going to be tons of touch points and there's tons of tactics to try to convince that customer to make a purchase, whether that's re-engaging them with email or remarketing towards them or getting them in the door for the first place. So that's where linear is really nice, because it basically divvies up that credit. And, instead of saying, hey, only this one drove the conversion or only this one got in the door, you can kind of evaluate all the different touch points and see, okay, which ones generally are in the conversion path for people to eventually make that purchasing decision.
Right, exactly. Okay. What about time decay? This one is interesting. It actually favors the recency. So favors the later touch points in the journey. So what it does is it actually gives 50% of the credit to the click closest to the conversion or the interaction closest to the conversion. And then each previous click receives a percentage in a decreasing manner. So from most recent to least recent, it divvies up that credit and it gets a little bit smaller the further out from the conversion you get. So in the same scenario before, if you have a really high consideration item that takes a long time to purchase and someone had a conversion path of 20 different interactions, it's going to give most of the credit to the most recent one and least credit to the first one, which we haven't really found. And Nick, you might disagree, or you might have other anecdotal scenarios where this was used, but I haven't found really a whole lot of use for this one. I don't see a lot of clients using this one or really even caring about this one. You?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, to be honest. I would say that the value that you could take from this one is that, let's say you're very, you're really stuck on last click. And I don't want to say stuck, but let's say you really just want to consider last click still. This is a good kind of like early step towards evaluating the whole funnel, is where it still favors a lot of those last click, but it's like a conservative way to then start to kind of open your eyes a little bit more to these other parts of the funnel.
So this is like training wheels.
Yeah, let's go with that. It's kind of between last click and linear. You're just kind of learning.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a good.
Fair enough. I like that characterization. I've never really actually thought about it that way, but I think that's a really good way to put it, that you're so tied to last click. Your whole organization is last click. Every meeting that you're going into with your, VP of marketing is talking about last click by channel, by campaign, whatever. This is a kind of a way that you can start to put those training wheels on and transition to a little bit more, into a different attribution model without going all in. Okay. What about position based? This one's kind of cool. What this one does is it divides 80% of the conversion value to the first and last click. So it gives 40 to the first, 40 to the last, and then it divvies up the remaining 20% of those middle interactions evenly. So this one is pretty cool, I think, because last click is very important, of course. First click is very important as well. All those middle ones are important too, but if you kind of want a advanced model that is not just simply linear, this is a good way to give a little bit more credit to first and last, because we know those are kind of intuitively a little bit more important. Like the first one is obviously huge because you need to know how did you originally get that person in the door. The last one is huge because it ultimately compelled them to make a decision. And then those middle ones are important too, so they get a little bit of love in there as well. The second bullet point here, that it stresses the importance of awareness and acquisition. This is a great tool to use if you are running a lot of upper funnel as well as lower funnel type campaigns, because it allows you to give enough importance to both of them and then kind of split everything else up in the middle. But again, this is, we want to stress that we're not advocating to use one over the other. What we recommend is when you're looking at your campaign performance, toggle back through all of these and kind of analyze the performance based, on each one of these models, and look through each different lens and see what kind of insights you can get from it. But yeah, now you know how position-based works. We think it's interesting, and I know Nick, a couple of your bigger clients, they like this one a lot, and you guys tend to look at this when you're on calls and in meetings and stuff, right?
Yeah, I really like this one because it really is kind of like a happy medium between first and last click. And if it means anything, Google, from the different attribution models, they tend to push us towards kind of this one, because it gives a good way to both drive new traffic and drive new users, and also, hey, like at the end of the day, it matters what actually convinced someone to purchase, and so it's a good way to balance both.
Yeah. Google has their own kind of Google attribution tool that they're pushing now, and they have data-driven attribution within AdWords, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But before those things were really coming to the forefront, they were harping on this one as a really solid model to use. So definitely support that. Google data-driven attribution. Now, what this is we're departing from Google Analytics a little bit, and this is actually a Google AdWords thing. Within AdWords, when you go to your conversion settings in AdWords, that is where you actually set your default attribution model for each conversion. So you create a conversion, you place the JavaScript on your confirmation page of your website, or now if you're using the global tag, you just have one tag across all pages, but you have a little bit different JavaScript snippet on the conversion page. That's not really relevant. Anyway, within the settings of the conversion, there's a section for attribution model, and it always defaults to last click, but you can actually change that in AdWords to any of those other models that we just talked about. But you can also change it now to this new one, which is called data-driven attribution. And what it does is it attempts to split up the credit for each touch point, but it's based completely on Google's algorithm. We don't know if they're using a position-based or a time decay or what. It bakes in all this other customer data, like where they're located, what their shopping habits are. Do they tend to be a first interaction shopper or a last interaction? Like there's so much data that goes into it that we don't really know. It's a bit of a black box in terms of how they actually built this. Of course, like most things with Google, they're not going to tell us the proprietary information, but they characterize it as a smart attribution model, and it completely varies for each conversion, each customer. But if you do enable data-driven attribution, it allows you to, within AdWords, start to break up conversion credit for each one of your campaigns. And so, for example, if you have 10 conversions in a week, each campaign, some of your campaigns might say 1.4 conversions or 3.6 conversions, and that's because every conversion that happens is divvied up among all the campaigns that contributed to that conversion. So if someone clicked on a shopping ad and then later they clicked on a text ad and then they converted, that conversion might be like 0.8 conversions for the shopping ad and 0.2 conversions for the text ad. That's how it works. So it can be a little bit of a adjustment period for you to start evaluating your data that way within AdWords. So we don't really recommend changing it. We just want you to be aware of what it is. But again, this is Google AdWords, not Google Analytics. This option, data driven, is not available in Google Analytics. It's just a Google AdWords attribution setting within your conversion action. So it does require that you have a specific amount of data for this to really be relevant. If you're only getting 30 to 50 to 100 conversions a month in your account, probably not the best option for you. But if you're one of these advertisers that's getting, in the multiple hundreds to thousands of conversions a month, we definitely recommend at least considering this as an option, because it does do a good job of divvying up conversions among the different campaigns that you have. Okay, let's move to the next section, which is looking at some Google Analytics reports that you can actually start to look at that can be helpful to you when you're getting into this new kind of attribution mindset and going away from just last click. The first one is the all traffic report. Obviously, most of you are pretty familiar with this report. This is kind of the default report that most people look at, and this just shows you all your different traffic sources, all your different source medium. And the second one is the multi-channel funnels report, which shows assisted conversions. And then the last one, we're going to talk about multi-channel funnels and top conversion paths. So here's the all traffic by source medium report. This, again, it attributes value to each one of these based on the default model that you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at last click. And here we see just each traffic source, each medium, and how the statistics look, transactions, revenue, etc. Oh, excuse me, let's get the head. So this is a pretty basic report. There's not a whole lot of insight here other than just top level, last click, last interaction, revenue, and transactions being driven by each one of these traffic sources. All right, now let's look at the assisted conversions report. Now again, this is not necessarily looking at a specific attribution model. So let me take a step back. This is a report that helps you understand the attribution impact of your traffic sources. So this is not, again, a attribution report. It's simply an assisted conversions report. So what this does is it's looking at the default channels, and when you're looking at a channel report, again, multi-channel funnels, this is showing the default channel groupings in Google Analytics. And this is important to touch on quickly because I want you to understand how Google Analytics reads all these traffic and how they group them into channels. First of all, direct traffic is obviously someone who types in your domain name direct and goes directly to your website, or they have your homepage loaded through a bookmark or whatever it may be. This is just a direct visit to your website without any other kind of interaction. Paid search groups together everything that has CPC in the medium. So when you're using Google Analytics reads the source of your traffic, and it also reads the medium of your traffic. If you're using AdWords, every AdWords campaign that comes into Google Analytics or that comes into your website will be treated as paid search. And if you're using Bing ads or Yahoo ads, for example, typically you're using tags on them to denote that the traffic is from CPC. And so that automatically gets lumped into paid search. Organic is organic, obviously. Email is anything that comes from an email campaign. And then display is anything that has the medium of display in it. So if you're using Google AdWords display campaigns, for example, those actually get lumped into paid search, which is kind of tricky. If you're using like another provider, like an AdRoll or Criteo or something like that, those will get lumped into display depending on how you have the source medium of your UTM tag set up. So
hey,
anyway,
Lou, I have a question about this one.
Yeah,
So
sure.
we
Go
have
ahead.
a question coming from Trevor, who's wondering if you can use these GA assisted conversion reports to see the benefits of high top of funnel campaigns, or is it, you know, just reporting on the specific channel and the success of that specific channel?
Yeah, you can actually look at, you don't have to look at the channels over here on the left. You can actually look at this through the lens of campaigns. So
Okay.
if you have a campaign, you can look at a campaign report and you can also analyze assisted conversion value that way. But that's actually what we're going to go into in a little bit, is grouping your tactics by funnel stage and how to set up those custom channel groupings. But Nick, you might have something to add here as well.
Yeah, and I would just say kind of similar to what we were talking about with the different default, modeling with looking at the different reports, not necessarily saying, hey, you should choose one. But to look at all the reports. These are just other reports that you also can look at to just generally say, hey, in this case, assisted conversions, it's saying, hey, what sources were involved in the purchasing path? So, just another way to see what sources and what channels were involved in the path, but it's not a one size fits all, like, hey, we're looking at this assisted conversion value and saying that is exactly how much revenue this influenced. It's more of just getting an understanding of, hey, some of these channel groupings might have low last click or direct conversions, or might have very high, but aren't involved heavily with a customer's purchase path. So it's kind of just another report to complement the other modelings that we've already kind of shown.
Yeah, and we'll talk about when we get into the custom channel groupings, how you can start to look at upper funnel campaign performance and how it's driving assisted conversion value. But again, these are just the default channel groupings in Google Analytics. But the main thing we wanted you to take away from this report is that what this shows is the amount of assisted conversions that each one of these channels is driving, the revenue associated with those assisted conversions, and then it compares that to the last click. So assisted conversion simply means any click or any interaction with these sources that's not last click. So I think the kind of hard and fast takeaway from this slide is focus on the right side, the last column here. The last column is a expression or a metric of the assisted value divided by the last click value or the direct value. And the higher this is, the more of an introductory campaign or introductory tactic this is. So notice display at the bottom, it only drove 23,671 last click conversions, but it drove 53,439 first click, or excuse me, assisted conversions. So throughout the customer journey, display played a great assisting role. It wasn't typically the last interaction. So that's why you see over here this metric, this expresses a numerical value, and 2.26 is pretty high. Compare that to direct, which is under 1. Anything under 1 tends to be a last click heavy channel, right? So direct, as we talked about earlier, this drives majority last click conversions in revenue as opposed to first click. So the way you think about it is you're running a lot of display campaigns that tends to get in front of new audiences, and then they later interact with other channels, and they ultimately go direct to your website, make a purchase. That's why this report is valuable, because it shows you, because you might be looking in AdWords, for example, or you might be looking in your display platform, and you see that you've spent 100K this year to only drive 80K in last click revenue. But when you look in analytics, you can see that your display campaigns are actually doing a good job of being assisters, assisting tactics. So that's what this report looks at, and that's kind of the main takeaway from that. All right. So this is a similar way to look at that, but this is actually looking at the actual conversion paths. So this report visualizes the common paths that lead to conversions. And so in this sense, you can see that the most common conversion for this particular advertiser is the most common conversion path, I should say, is that someone finds them through an organic listing, a Google organic listing, and then later they go direct to the website. So this conversion path has 2 touch points, organic and then direct. So again, if you're just looking at the channel report, the default channel report in analytics, you're going to see that direct performs really well. But those people found you somehow. They didn't go direct to your website first. They found you through an organic listing. So then you can start to understand the true value of your organic, or you can understand that there is more value to organic than what is being presented in that default report. Direct times 2, that just means that someone came to your website twice before purchasing. This is really common right here. Google CPC, then direct. And I think I want to highlight this one because this happens so much. And in fact, if you look at all my brands that I work with, this is probably the most common conversion path that we see. People find you through a paid search ad, and then they go direct to the website. And so again, when you're looking at Google CPC performance and analytics, you have to go beyond just looking at the last click, because you're missing out on so many conversions here that you're not understanding the impact of Google CPC. Yeah, anything else to add there on the multi-channel funnels conversion paths report, Nick?
No, I think this is probably my favorite report, and maybe that's a little bit nerdy, but basically I like this because it provides a really easy visual where you can actually see, hey, what are my customers actually doing? And especially if you add on additional layers to your marketing to re-engage with people. I had a client who added email as like a strategy where they basically weren't doing any email outreach, and they wanted to see kind of the impact that it had. And what we ended up seeing is once they added email, is that email was re-engaging with a bunch of people, and so it drove a ton of last click conversions, but also you could see in the path that it actually helped follow up on a bunch of first click or first touch point campaigns as well.
It helped kind of close the loop.
Yeah, I really like this report, and I think it's a great visual also to help convince anyone who might not be on board with looking at beyond last click that it's a clear picture of, hey, people are coming to your site and purchasing. It's not just they just suddenly know your brand name and they go to the site and they purchase. There's more to it. So I really like this report.
For sure. Me too. It's a cool report. Okay, let's move on to custom channel groupings. This is huge. I mean, if you guys are listening right now, tune in right now. If you kind of zoned out a little bit, recommend tuning in right now, because this is where it gets real. Okay, custom channel groupings. We talked about how the default channel groupings in Google Analytics are these guys over here on the right. You have to go beyond that, because if you don't, like I said earlier, there was one key thing. Every AdWords campaign, for example, that drives traffic to your website gets grouped by Google Analytics as paid search. That's not very insightful, because you have text ad campaigns, shopping campaigns, display campaigns, dynamic search campaigns, branded campaigns that are focused on your brand keywords, generic or non-brand campaigns. You got category terms, you got product specific terms. You have all these different kind of tactics and ways that people search on Google, and different campaign tactics or mechanisms that attack that part of the funnel or that type of search, that to lump everything in as one catch-all of paid search is not going to give you any insights at all into how your tactics are playing with each other. So what custom channel groupings do is it allows you to set up specific labels or specific criteria for your traffic that goes beyond these default channel groupings, and it allows you to set up these custom channels. You can immediately then toggle to it in your reports, and you can apply it, retroactively as well, and you can see how your historical data was affected by these. And then again, any report that you're looking at, you don't have to change any data. You just simply have to toggle between these different channel groupings, and you can see much more insights. So the main benefit of them is that you can group together tactics. And that's what we talked about earlier. I think tactics is a key kind of buzz term in this webinar, because we want you to understand that the only way that you can see the true performance of your campaigns is to group them by tactics and understand how they influence each other. So take, for example, like we said, branded text ads versus non-branded text ads. If you are nicksdoggybeds.com and you're looking at keyword performance or campaign performance of Nick's Doggy Beds, exact match keywords, in the same group as fluffy dog beds, those are two completely different types of searches, two completely different types of customers. One of them already knows you and knows what they want. The other one is completely oblivious that you even exist, and you have campaigns within the same platform, AdWords, that are trying to target those two completely different types of scenarios, but yet in Google Analytics, you're evaluating performance of just paid search. Completely the wrong way to go about it. Okay. So this screenshot actually shows a custom channel groupings that we set up for one of our clients. And notice how it has direct, it has Google text ads versus Google shopping. So immediately we're splitting up text versus shopping as opposed to looking at it all together. If we wanted to get even more granular, we would split branded text versus non-branded text, or whatever other criteria you have to get as granular as you want, depending on your business needs. But in this case, this particular advertiser only focuses on a particular type of keywords that they buy, so it wasn't necessary to break it up. But yeah, you can get even more granular than that. And in fact, we recommend splitting up brand from generic text ads. And then even with shopping campaigns as well, you can split that out between brand and non-brand, depending on what your shopping structure is. At CPC Strategy, we utilize an isolation technique. We call it ISO, where we actually split out brand from non-brand traffic, typically for shopping, which is really hard to do if you don't understand how to manipulate priority settings and negative keywords within shopping campaigns. That's our core strategy with Google Shopping. And so we typically have brand shopping versus non-brand shopping in our channel groupings as well. But we realize that a lot of you might only have one shopping campaign, or you might be treating brand traffic the same as non-brand traffic for shopping. So you might not need to break it out, although we always recommend breaking out brand versus non-brand. But anyway, this is just a look at it. So the key thing also here is that we are looking in this particular report is looking at the model comparison tool. And you find model comparison tool by going on the left side of Google Analytics, you go under the conversion section and then attribution, conversion section, and then attribution. And then there's a section for model comparison tool. And what you see there is you can look at the difference between last interaction and first interaction. Did you have something to add there, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I like that we showed this within the model comparison tool, because this is a great way to see both first and last click interactions. So, attribution that we've talked about, and to be able to break that up based off the different tactics. One thing to note is, when we're talking about splitting this up into, maybe non-branded and branded Google ads, this also not only can break down one default channel, but it could also combine multiple channels if they are similar tactics. Maybe you want to look at all your remarketing efforts. So you pull all your remarketing data from Facebook and from Instagram and from Google Display, or maybe you think branded shopping is the same regardless of whether it's Bing and whether it's Google, so you can combine those. So the point is you can get as granular as possible, or you can create these custom channels that make the most business sense for you. And then from there, you can obviously then use the attribution modeling, which we've talked about why it's so important. And one example would be the model comparison tool, but this one report provides us so much data that otherwise we might have to do by checking like 4 different interfaces, checking 3 different attribution models, and you know, it would take forever versus just grouping them together.
For sure. One thing is that, exactly like Nick said, it doesn't have to be Google text ads. You can lump together Google and Bing text ads and Yahoo and anything else that you're running into just text ads. You can lump together all brand text, like he was saying. So we'll get into that in just a second. In terms of the model comparison tool, one really key thing here is that, again, notice this last column. What this is expressing is the difference of each one of these tactics in terms of last interaction versus first interaction. So when you see the red arrows, that means that first interaction tends to be less effective than last. And when you see the green arrows, you're seeing that first interaction is actually more effective than last interaction. Or it's not necessarily more or less effective, it's the difference. This 46.23% represents the difference between the first interaction conversions and the last interaction conversions. So 62,000 is 46% higher than 43,000. And so notice direct, for example. Direct has a red arrow, so that means that it tends to be a last interaction conversion driver. There's 60K conversions last interaction and 37K first interaction. So this is a down arrow on this last percentage change column. So if you're looking at this report and you're trying to identify which one of your tactics are really valuable from a first touch point perspective, check out Google Shopping, for example. Google Shopping is 65% more effective as a first touch tactic. Now, again, I shouldn't say more effective. I should say that it's 64%, has a 64% higher value as a first touch point than last. So it drove 15K conversions through last click. It drove 25K conversions as a first interactor. And we see this really commonly, right? So people are interacting with Google Shopping ads more and more and more every year, every month. Google Shopping is becoming a more prominent experience for retail on google.com, and Google Shopping is a huge place to have your products, and especially to get in front of new customers. So again, in the Nick's Doggy Beds example, someone searches for fluffy doggy bed and they see a fluffy doggy bed that they really like, just the right amount of fluffiness for them. They click on it, they go to the website, they don't make a purchase, but later they interact with other marketing tactics and they go direct to the website. This is where you would start to unlock the value of those campaigns by looking at this report. Google Shopping ads drive 65% more or 65% higher than last click in terms of their attribution impact, right? So we definitely recommend looking at this report and determine which one of your tactics are kind of most effective for which funnel that they are targeting. Okay, so we've got about 10 more minutes, 8 to 10 more minutes. So let's look at how you actually build a custom channel grouping. And I believe this will be the last thing that we go over.
Yeah.
So let's take you through it step by step. First thing, sign into Google Analytics. On the left side, the left panel over here, you want to click on Admin. And then once you do that, you'll see something that says that you'll see a section for personal tools and assets. And there you want to go to custom channel groupings and then plus new channel grouping. And then define a new channel. So what you're doing when you're defining a new channel is you're telling Google Analytics what criteria to look at in order to group together these campaigns. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So you define the rules for the new channel. These rules are case sensitive, so be careful with that. So here you go. You name it. You name your channel grouping. Let's take, for example, branded text ads, or let's just say Google text ads. So it all depends on, a lot of this depends on the naming conventions of your campaigns. And so if you don't have proper naming conventions for your campaigns, it can be hard for Google to understand what your rules are. So let's say, for example, that all of your branded text campaigns in AdWords and in Bing have the name brand-text in them. And so in that case, your criteria would be not source or not medium, but you can actually change this drop-down menu right here, and you can choose campaign name contains brand search or brand text or whatever it is. You can give it a color, and that actually helps when you're looking at the report to have all of them be different colors, just to kind of make it visually more easily to digest. And yeah, so you can base your rules on source, medium, campaign, whatever. So like I was saying, if you wanted to lump together all your brand or all your text ad campaigns across all your different search marketing channels, you could just say medium equals CPC and campaign name contains brand text or something like that. So cool, yeah, you can actually use up to 15 different criteria in each channel. So, inevitably you're gonna have a lot of filtering that you need to do in order to drill it down to the exact kind of tactic that you wanna narrow in on. So you might have to exclude certain things, you might have multiple criteria, but play around with these rules, and then you can actually preview it over here. You can preview how much data falls into that, and that can give you an idea of if you need to make any further additions. And then once you have all your rules set up, you just click done, and then you're good. And so you can only have 100 custom channel groupings per, I believe it says per user here, but I believe it's actually per view in Google Analytics. So once you set up a custom channel grouping for that view, you can have 100 custom channels. And I've never seen anything more than like 30 or 40. It would be really rare to even get close to 100. So don't worry about that maximum. So what this report is this is looking at the channel report like we were looking at many slides ago. Remember how we were looking at just the default channels report? Now, rather than looking at default channels, you can change this here where my mouse is from the master or from the default channel groupings. You can change this to whatever custom one you have set up. So this one's called master channel grouping. Yours might be called whatever. So just change it to that, and then you can start to see your different channels that you set up: brand search versus non-brand search, transactional email, shopping ads. So this is a little bit more granular than just those default ones. And again, this is kind of a cool way and an effective way to look more strategically at your channels. And so then you can actually toggle back and forth, right? So like anything that we've talked about in this webinar today, we're not recommending that you just change to a new reporting model, a new attribution model, a new channel groupings report. All we're saying is that you need to have the ability to understand these things and set them up in your accounts so that you can toggle back and forth and not just be tied to looking at the data through one lens. Because we all are in meetings where we have campaigns that we push for that that we want to try and evaluate fairly. And if someone is just pushing back on us with like a last click performance model, we need to be able to at least toggle over and show how we can get deeper insights than just looking at last click. So that's what it's all about. It's not about just set it and forget it. It's about equipping you guys to understand how these different things work, where you can find them, how you can set them up, and then it kind of takes your analysis to the next level. So here's the last thing, I believe. Yeah, we have the last slide here. This is a simple a simple channel groupings report, this is a path report, a conversion path report like we talked about earlier. So what we did here is that we're looking at the same type of conversion path that we looked at earlier, or the same type of path report that we looked at earlier, but instead of looking at the default channel groupings, we've changed this to a custom channel grouping that we've set up. So here again, notice how our text ads are doing a great job of introducing traffic that's ultimately converting through direct. And same thing here, Google shopping ads introducing a lot of traffic that's then converting through direct. Google text ads here are driving affiliate conversions through Pepper Jam. So this is the type of report and insight that you would never get if you just look at default channel groupings. So this again is just a way that it looks ultimately when you set it all up. It's pretty simple to set up. You might have some issues when you're setting up those default channels with having to filter out certain things, and you might have to play around with it for a while, but definitely recommend setting up custom channel groupings. And of course, if you have any issues with that, or you want us to take a look at it and give you guys kind of an analysis of what you're doing in GA and AdWords, of course you can reach out. So Nick, if you don't have anything else to add, looks like we will just kick it back over to Anna and kind of give us a recap.
Yeah, thank you, Lou and Nick, for going over all this content. So just a final recap on everything we touched on today. What is attribution modeling? Why is it important? Breaking down Google Analytics default attribution models, as well as custom channel groupings, and then analytic reports to complement these attribution models. So in this presentation, we did go over the one-on-one when it comes to attribution modeling and custom channel groupings, but we realized that there are tons of factors to consider, which model to use and which ones to compare, and, when to adjust your ad spend, and, which campaign was truly successful. We understand it can be overwhelming, and as well, Google Analytics is a free tool, but there's so much to unlock, and sometimes you do need to work with an agency, someone like CPC Strategy, who can further unlock these insights for you, be it custom attribution models, customer journey, brand lift, and path reports. So, if you would like to go over what it would be like to work with us and work with experts on, stronger attribution models and prospecting campaigns, please let us know. I've launched the second poll question here. For you all to be mindful, I will not post the results to the audience. This is mostly for internal, but if you would like to schedule an e-commerce strategy evaluation with CPC Strategy, let us know what you're focused on today. So we put in some options there: Google Shopping, paid search, pay-per-click, lead generation. Those are just some of our e-commerce strengths over here. Or if it's another one not listed, you can mark that as well. And if right now is not the time that you want to start a conversation with us, we completely understand. So there's a no thank you option as well. So I'll leave this poll question up kind of as we hit the Q&A. So Lou and Nick, I know that you definitely cleared up some questions along the way, but now we have some time to kind of go over the ones that we didn't get to. So. Sure. So I have a question from Shlomo here, who I know is in attendance, and he sent over this question before the webinar. So I know you both mentioned, you don't pledge allegiance to one model and just using one model and looking one model, and you don't think really one is better than the others. But Shlomo was wondering if there are specific models that you can use in certain specific situations, specific circumstances.
Yeah, I would say it just really depends on what your mindset is. Again, we wouldn't, like you mentioned, we really wouldn't say, hey, you need to do this model and stick to this model. But I would say is, for instance, if you're really focused on growth, you should probably spend a lot of your time looking at the first click attribution and seeing, okay, what's getting people in the door effectively? How can we expand on that? Versus if maybe you're very, very, very ROAS conscious, you're very conservative with your approach, maybe you do just last click and time decay. Again, we really believe you should look at all touch points, and at the end of the day, growing your business and doing so profitably, you can't simply just look at one or the other. You have to but the example again is first click. If you really want to be aggressive, that's probably the main example. Otherwise, I wouldn't say there's necessarily one situation that you would really be like, yes, for that you need to do this model. I guess the one last example that comes to mind is linear with how Lou was talking about earlier, is if there's tons of touch points and it's a long purchasing path, linear are one of those options that gives credit to all the different sources that are touched. I think probably one of those options are your best bet.
Yeah, what I would add to that in Google Analytics and in AdWords, you can actually see your typical time to conversion on your website. So they show you how long it typically takes someone from first interaction to conversion. And so I would say if that's longer than 10 days, you definitely need to be looking at a linear model or some type of attribution model for sure. That looks at, or that assigns appropriate value to those early touch points and middle touch points. I would avoid last click and I would avoid time decay. But if your conversion time is typically shorter, then that's when you would maybe tend to look a little bit more at last click or give more emphasis on the last click, maybe time decay or maybe position based.
Got it. Thank you so much. Shlomo, hopefully we answered your question there. I know we are going over now, so I'll get to just a couple more questions really quickly. We have one from Peter who's asking, can you attribute Amazon sales from social media or advertising or AdWord advertising campaigns? And just, I'm going to send everyone out there a Web to Amazon webinar we did that really does pertain to this question in regards to, attribution from Google campaigns to Amazon. So I will send that out to everyone. But Lou and Nick, can you attribute Amazon sales from social or AdWord campaigns?
So that's kind of a tricky question, but first of all, Amazon transactions happen on Amazon.com. They don't happen on your e-commerce website. So Google Analytics is really concerned with traffic on your website. But that being said, you can actually upload offline sales data. So you could theoretically take your Amazon sales data and upload it into Google Analytics, but it would be really tricky to start trying to tie it back to user IDs and stuff like that. In order to understand what the original source that drove that traffic would be, it's really tough. You can use Amazon Web Analytics to put actual UTM tags on your web to Amazon campaigns, and you can start to track that in Amazon Analytics itself. And Amazon actually just released an attribution platform that's going to allow you to look at traffic sources that you're driving in. So I would say that at this point in time, using Google Analytics for Amazon sales and marketing evaluation is not the best. I would start looking more at using a web to Amazon strategy. And Anna said she can follow up with any of you guys that are interested in that, understanding how that works. And also look into Amazon attribution platform that's coming out. We actually just released a blog post on it yesterday or 2 days ago. And if you guys subscribe to us, you should have gotten that. If you don't subscribe, definitely recommend subscribing to our blog and following us, because we're always giving you guys updates and stuff like that. And Amazon attribution is going to be a big thing moving forward, we feel like. So check that out as well.
Okay, so I know we didn't answer everyone's questions, but we've run out of time, so I don't want to take too much out of everyone's day. So, just you can feel free to email us those questions if you feel like you were left unanswered, but we've run out of time, so unfortunately we have to wrap it up right now. But again, a big thank you to Nick and Lou. Thank you for the Q&A round, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you to our audience. Again, as Lou said in the beginning, we understand that an hour of your time is really valuable, and we appreciate it. That you spent it here with us at CPC Strategy. So once again, this is Annalicia, and I'm signing off from CPC Strategy in San Diego.
Bye, guys.
Bye.